I think it really goes to what is our definition of disease. So I've been a medical doctor now for almost 20 years. And I can tell you that the bulk of what I see, I'd say probably 80% of what I see, is in some way driven by our collective modern lifestyles. And when we change our lifestyles in the right way, I have seen so many of these so-called diseases disappear. That's what I managed to demonstrate on my BBC show that's been shown now in 70 countries around the world. I've shown things like type 2 diabetes, vanished within 30 days, a change that has proved sustainable 2 or 3 years later. Panic attacks, anxiety gone down by 70, 80% in just 6 weeks by making these changes. Chronic back pain for 30 years, right? Once we started addressing the cause, completely gone. Okay, and the list goes on. I realized that no matter who they were, no matter what the name of their disease was, you know what? When you make simple changes in 4 key areas to your lifestyle, it is amazing how many of those symptoms just start to vanish.
You've said that this is the first generation being born now that has a shorter life expectancy than the generation before them, which is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, in the United States, and I think in the UK now as well, the current generation that are being born, have got a lower life expectancy than any previous generation before them, or certainly in our recent history. And that's pretty worrying, actually. I've got 2 young kids at home myself, and that makes me worry as what sort of world are they being born into? Are there now issues with health that are going to mean they're going to be less well off than the generation before them? And I think this really sort of plays into why there's such disillusionment at the moment with the way medicine is practiced. In the 20th century, right, even 30, 40 years ago, the bulk of what we were seeing as doctors, the bulk of what was coming in and what people were complaining of were what we call acute problems. They responded very well to the sort of pharmaceutical model, the one pill for every ill model. So let's say you have a pneumonia, for example, okay? This is when modern medicine is brilliant. So a pneumonia, the overgrowth of a bug in your lung, right? You come in to see the doctor says, yeah, this is the issue, right? I'm going to give you a pill to get rid of that bug. And then within a week, within 2 weeks, your problem's gone, right? The model of medicine we have now responds, was set up in that era. What we're seeing today in the 21st century is chronic disease, whether it's type 2 diabetes, okay, which is like a modern epidemic, whether it's mental health problems, right? In the UK, right, 1 in 4 people in any given year are going to have a mental health problem. Whether it's Alzheimer's disease, which, as we're living longer, people are now worrying, as I get older, how am I going to be? Am I going to be able to function? Am I going to be able to talk to my family, or I'm going to start losing my brain health and my memory? So these sort of conditions require a different approach. And that's why life expectancy is going down, because we're not really well equipped to tackle these problems, because these problems don't respond to a one pill for every ill model. You've got to change multiple things, right? You've got to understand, and a lot of people still don't understand, including a lot of the profession, that these are conditions. There may be a genetic tendency, right? You may have a genetic predisposition. That is not your destiny, though. It doesn't mean you're going to get that condition. Right? We know there's the field is called epigenetics, which is basically this whole idea that you're born with some genes, but your environment, how you live your life, that shapes and that determines whether those genes are switched on, if they're switched off, how those genes are expressed. And that's a big shift, actually, and that's exciting, because that means that in a huge part, we've got control over what happens to us. I think that's incredibly exciting. So we need to start teaching our children. We need to teach our doctors. We need to educate the public. We need to change the ethos in schools, in institutions, to start helping us foster a community where health is absolutely valued at the top. Because if it isn't, right, we're going to struggle in our lives. So, I've watched many of your videos, Tom, and when we talk about trying to make a difference, trying to live a meaningful and purposeful life, right? health is an ingredient of that. When we feel better, we live more. So much of the time, the problems people are telling me about, the disagreements they're having, the family disharmony they're having, often it's because they don't feel good, right? They're putting the wrong things into their body, whether it's food, they're not sleeping enough, that's changing their hormones, that's making them moody, that's causing them to have tension with their children, with their partner, with their work colleagues, and it all starts to add up. And I've realized that often my training has taught me to suppress that downstream symptom, right, with a pill, without actually going upstream and figuring out, well, what's causing this in the first place? And the approach I try and take on my TV show, with my patients, with my book, it's really about saying, we've overcomplicated health, right? I want to simplify it. And we've overly focused on one area. So obviously everyone talks about food when we talk about health, and food's important, right? But it's not the only thing. There are other factors that I would say are equally important that even if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have known that. 5, 6 years ago, I thought it was all about food, right? But I've changed my mind now. You might be better off saying your diet is good enough. Right. Maybe the fact that you're on Netflix or YouTube till 1 a.m. every night and you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, actually, if you go to bed 1 hour earlier, you will find you get more bang for your buck than trying to cut out a little bit more sugar in your diet.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things about your approach is this whole notion of lifestyle over diet. As in, it's more important than that. And I thought, whoa, that's pretty radical. And 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing. I was at the height of building Quest Nutrition. I thought the answer to everything was what you were eating 100%.
Me too.
Right?
Yeah.
And then my wife ends up having this catastrophic problem with her microbiome. And it came on like that. It went from no sense of we have a problem to our life got put on hold for a year because she just couldn't eat and she was malnutrition. It really actually got scary at one point. And I thought my wife's diet is perfect. So clearly there's something going on here that I don't fully understand. Part of it was my definition of perfect was totally screwed up. And then the other part was that there are so many other lifestyle factors. Talk about this notion of the threshold effect, which I think is so important for people to understand.
Yeah, it's this idea that we've all got our personal threshold. Okay, so the way I explain it, if you were in my clinic with me right now, and I pretty much go through this with every patient, I say, look, let's say you were born in perfect health here. Right, we've got this sort of we've got a threshold, right? So we can deal with multiple insults up to a point. So that could be, poor diet, the fact that we don't move very much. We might have had a relationship breakup, which is a stress on our body. We may have a job we don't like, right? It's all building up, getting closer to our threshold. That's when they get sick, right? What I mean by that is often a patient will come in to see me and they'll say, doc, I was fine. Everything was going fine. And then, I changed my job, I don't like my new boss. And then, they come down with an autoimmune illness, right? But when you go into their history, you see things were not fine at all. We're very resilient as humans. We can deal with lots of stresses, right? But something is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And you can find the last stressor that tips you up, that pushes you over, right? But when you've gone over your threshold, often it's not a case anymore of taking off that last stressor, right? Often you have to go back to basics and build from scratch. Again, it's like, if we were juggling balls, I often say, in your life when things get busy, you can juggle 1 ball, 2 balls, 3 balls, 4 balls, and then someone chucks a 5th one in, and what happens? Everything falls down. And, we always look for what's that one thing that it is. Can I give you a case story?
Yeah,
right,
please.
right. This is a very typical patient of mine, but this is it was a guy in his 50s, I think it's a 52-year-old guy, right? He's got type 2 diabetes. Now he's a successful businessman. He's go all the time, right? He's, working hard, working weekends. He's always on his email, right? And he got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So he saw on TV in the UK, he saw my BBC show, the first series, and he saw what I did with that type 2 diabetic patient. So he drastically reduced the refined and processed carbs in his diet. Okay, and then he'd read some other blogs and he really got obsessed with low carb. And he was getting some changes, right? His blood sugar was coming down, but then it plateaued. And he was getting frustrated because he kept reading more and more blogs. He kept lowering his carb intake, and he just wasn't getting anywhere. So he ends up on my waiting list. He comes in to see me. And I remember going through everything with him, and I thought to myself, this is not a dietary issue anymore, right? Because he didn't realize, like many people don't, that your stress levels contribute to your blood sugar levels. Your sleep quality contributes to your blood sugar levels. It's not just your diet. Even though diet is something we get it, we eat a bit of sugar, that's going to put the sugar up in our blood. We get that. But we don't get, right, and there's some really good studies on this, that if you only sleep 4 to 5 hours a night for 6 nights, okay, you are 40% less good at managing your blood sugar, right? Wow. You become pre-diabetic after 5 to 6 days.
Just from the lack of sleep.
Just from a lack of sleep. It's incredible. But when you start understanding that, you think, well, of course we need a more balanced, holistic approach to helping these people. So this chap, so what I did with him, I said, look, your diet is brill, okay? Arguably, it's too good. Arguably, you're trying too hard now and it's stressing you out. I said, it's sleep and stress for you. So I talk about these 4 pillars, all right? I talk about food, movement, sleep, and relaxation. That it's not about perfection in any one pillar, but it's about balance across all 4. This approach takes the pressure off people. It's not about the perfect diet or the perfect gym routine. It's about making sure your diet is good enough, making sure you're moving enough, making sure you're doing something for your sleep and something for your stress levels. It's an approach that works in the short term, but it's also going to be working 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line. So this chap with type 2 diabetes, we came up with a system. I said, look, ideally, you'd have a 90-minute switch off before bed where you don't look at work emails, you don't go on your computer. He goes, I can't do that, 90 minutes, no way. I said, all right, what about 30 minutes? So he goes, okay. So we started with 30 minutes, okay? We agreed in the consultation, I spoke to him about meditation. And again, he was a bit skeptical on meditation. I said, okay, look, hear me out here. I tell you what, let's get an app, right? So we downloaded an app in the clinic, right? I said, okay, this is free. Download this. All I want you to do is commit to 5 minutes a day. That's it, okay? So all we agreed on was 30 minutes before bed, he'd switch off his computer and his tech and his work emails, and he'd do 5 minutes meditation per day with his app. Okay, that was it. And he starts off, he comes back in 4 weeks, and he's like, okay, I'm already starting to feel better. He's sleeping better. He feels less anxious and stressed the whole time. So that was my way in. Then we got to increase it. So it was an hour in the evening, okay? It was, he only stuck to 5 minutes meditation, but we then introduced something that I call the 3-4-5 breath. When you breathe in for 3, you hold for 4 and breathe out for 5. And he did that a few times throughout the week. And bit by bit, he started to introduce these practices. He increased his carb intake, because I said, you're being too aggressive. You don't need to be that aggressive with your carbs. Okay, 6 months later, the guy's blood sugar is no longer in the type 2 diabetic range. Wow. Okay, so he puts his carbs up, he improves his sleep, he gets his stress levels down, and his blood sugar starts to come down. And that's why I'm so passionate, Tom, that when we take this rounded 360-degree approach to health, not only does it yield fantastic results, okay, but it feels more accessible, it feels more achievable for people. I've got countless more case studies like that, but that's, I think, rather counterintuitive because, 5-6 years ago, I was using what is called a low-carb approach a lot with my patients. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the term low-carb. I think the beautiful thing about it is that it simplifies the concept so clearly that people get it. But I think, we have unfairly demonized fat for 30, 40 years. I worry we're going to do the same with another food group in the same way. And I think, ultimately, you look at these blue zones around the world, these areas around the world where people have got high rates of longevity. They're living to a ripe old age in good health. And you look at what they're doing. And I find it really interesting because a lot of them are having high carb diets. Like in Okinawa, in Japan, they're having an 80% carbohydrate diet. Oof. But the carbs are not the refined and processed carbs that we're having here in the West, right? They're local sweet potatoes, right? Which is very nourishing. You mentioned the gut microbiome. Sweet potatoes and those sort of colorful vegetables are fantastic for our gut health. Absolutely fantastic. And I actually think that's what holds all the diets around the world which work well, right? I think the commonality is not the carb content or the fat content. The commonality is they're all a local, minimally processed food that nourishes our microbiome. That's what I think is the unifying factor. And the other thing I think, when we look at these blue zones like Okinawa and we try and figure out, well, why are they doing so well? We're trying to figure out what is it in their diet that's the magic. But it ain't just the diet, it's the whole lifestyle, right? These guys have low stress levels. They sleep well, right? They're physically active every day. They prioritize community, right? That's why those guys are healthy, right? It's not just the one thing. And I think, why is it that this low carb approach seems to have such a fantastically beneficial role for so many people in the West? Well, I think what's going on here in the West, we are physically inactive, we are underslept, we're overstressed, we're having highly processed food, okay? Maybe it's, and all those things make you insulin resistant, which is what actually leads to type 2 diabetes and is behind a lot of cases of obesity. Maybe it's in this environment, in our highly stressed out, underslept Western environment, maybe it's in this environment that low carb approach has such a beneficial role. Maybe those guys, they stay under their threshold in a different way. They don't need to be as aggressive with their carbs, let's say, because they're getting all that sleep, they're getting their stress levels down. I think food is much more than fat versus carbs, but good health is much more than food, right?
Wow, that's really strong, yeah.
I've always been interested as a doctor as to what works in real life, right? I love the research papers, I love the science, but I'm more interested in how do you convert that into real life action for that person sitting in front of me. And I can tell you, one of my one of the most popular things from this book is what I call the 5-minute kitchen workouts. And this again came out of a need that I saw from my patients, right? So, strength training is very much undervalued in society. When we talk about activity and movement and exercise, right? We're always talking about, walking more or, doing more cardio. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but we neglect strength. Right. And once we hit 30, right? Once we get above the age of 30, we can lose 3 to 5% of our muscle mass every decade.
Whoa.
We can be even more above the age of 50. And, your muscle mass independently predicts your mortality. It's one of the strongest factors to determine how well you're going to be when you get older. So I was seeing all the research on this about 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember patients were coming in and I say to them, okay, guys, strength training is really important. I want you to work out for about 30, 40 minutes, 3 times a week, maybe get to the gym if you can. And I thought, okay, right, I've told them about the research. I come back 6 weeks later, said, hey guys, how are you getting on? Hey doc, I've been busy, the gym's a bit expensive, it's not on the way back from work, I've not really done it much. I thought, okay, I'm clearly not giving them advice in a way that they feel is practical for them, that they feel they can do in the context of their life. So I've got to do something better. And in that moment, in my consultation room, that 5-minute kitchen workout was born. I said, all right, I'll tell you what, let's forget about the gym. Let's forget about gym memberships, forget about buying equipment. I'm going to show you a workout you can do right here, right now, in your kitchen. I've got 20-year-old patients doing it. I've got 70-year-old patients doing it. You can modify it for any ability level. And, I find that by setting the bar low with people, right, and they achieve that, they feel good about themselves. They start to do more. It's about simple approaches that work in real life. Yeah, the science is all in there. But the science interests me, but it doesn't dictate what I do. I've got to convert that into what's going to really help my patients. Real life people with busy jobs, with busy lives, right, who want to be healthy.
I want to talk about the show for a second, because being with people, living with them for 4 to 6 weeks and getting in there, what are you seeing that are patterns of, I'll call it bad behavior, but I don't mean that in like the moral sense. I just mean it has an unintended consequence that they may not even realize? And then what are some of the fixes that are these simple things? So like in the movement pillar, you've got that, something simple they can do in the kitchen. But what are things that you see over and over and over that people do wrong that have a really simple fix?
So I'd say a few things. Yeah, food was a big one. There's no question. You know, when you open people's cupboards, you open their drawers and you see what's in there. You see the naughty drawers and you see the stuff that's in there. And then you also not only look at what's in there, which is basically all the highly processed food, it's all the sugary treats that live inside the house, right? But it's then as you're looking there, you see the family dynamic. You see like the wife, oh, you know, that's not mine, that's it. He always brings that in. I tell him not to bring that in. He goes, no. The husband's like, no, that's not the case at all. I bring these in because you like them, right? You see that in every house. So there's obviously this dynamic that, you know, who's responsible for it? You know, everyone's putting the blame without realizing it on other people. It's not me, it's, you know, I'm doing it for the family. Right. So I find that quite interesting. So one of the fixes there is to control the environment you can control, right? If you're trying to make healthy, let's say food choices, right? Don't keep that stuff in your house, right? So I say to them, when you walk outside your front door these days, you are having to exercise your willpower every step of the way. You go to a gas station, right? And you go to pay, you're walking past all the chocolates, all the bags of chips, everything, right? You're having to exert your willpower there. If you want to buy coffee in a coffee shop, right? You stand in line, you order, you're walking past the muffins, the pastries, the croissants. You're constantly having to use the willpower when you step outside your house. I'm saying don't use it inside your house, right? If you're serious about making those choices and you want a sugary treat, you know what? Have it. Once a week, once every 2 weeks when you go out and meet your buddies and you sit in a cafe and have it there. Don't bring it in your house, because what will happen is that you will come back tired, you'll come back stressed one day from work, you'll feel a bit low, and you will start gorging on what's in the house. You know, a few months ago, I was going through a very stressful time at work and all kinds of things were going on, and I was sitting at home in the evening with my wife and I thought, you know, I fancy something sweet. But I looked in the cupboards, there was nuts, there was olives. I was like, you know, I don't feel like those. I want something sweet, but there was nothing there. And you know what? 10 minutes later, that craving goes. Right. It's what I call an itchy mouth, right? I'm not hungry. It's just, you know, I fancy something to put in my mouth. So, you know, controlling the environment you can control, I think it's a very important thing that I taught all of those families to do. And they really, although they were resistant at first, they really saw the benefit.
All right, two things I want to dive a little deeper there. So, number one, do you ever get into the psychology of like, oh, I got this for you. No, you got it for you. What are you talking about? Do you ever just like put a finger on it and say, hey, let's talk about what's driving that?
Yeah, absolutely. And more these days than I even used to do, because I've realized that people have got very powerful emotional attachments as to why they do certain things. I'm going to tell you about the very first day I ever filmed for this documentary series, right? This is the first family. I rock up to this town called Shrewsbury in the UK. And, you know, a little bit nervous because there's like a camera crew that's going to watch me be a doctor and try and help these guys, right? First time I've done that. And I meet the family, lovely family. That's been struggling with their health, a whole variety of health issues. And I said, guys, what would you typically eat, right? So the father says to the family, hey guys, you know, just the usual tonight? He said, yeah, Dad, just the usual, please. He says, come on, Doc, come with me. So I go, sit in the car, right? We drive 15 minutes out of town to go to a McDonald's drive-thru. On the way there, the guy says to me, he says, Doc, you know what? I know this stuff isn't good for us, and it's really, really embarrassing for me to actually be taking you here, but this is what we do, right? And I don't think I quite got it back then, but I've reflected on this a lot since then, which is these guys knew that these weren't healthy choices. He knew that. But it was only when this third party comes in, someone who's got no emotional attachment to this family, he starts to feel really guilty. And he feels he has to apologize to me for the choices he's making, which first of all, he doesn't need to apologize. But I found that really interesting. What's going on there? Why do people make choices that, you know, are not serving them, right?
Why do you think they do it for real?
Because I think those choices, on some level, nourish them. You know, if they're lacking something in some aspects of their life, they're feeding their reward pathways. You know, so many people will eat to make themselves feel better. You know, if they had a stressful day at work or they're feeling a bit low, food is a comfort for them. Food helps them feel better about themselves, albeit for a short period of time. You know, we all know that feeling. If we have a sugary treat, you know, we can feel good.
Yeah.
You know, so we know intuitively that food can change our mood, right? There's a lot of science now behind all of that. But I think it's because on a deep emotional level, maybe when they were a kid, they were conditioned that, you know, you're not feeling so good, you're feeling, well, oh, should we have some nice sweet treats? And this particular family, for example, again, you know, the dad would say that I buy this stuff because it makes my wife happy. She really likes it. So in some way, he felt that he was doing a really nice thing for his wife. You know, his wife really enjoyed that sort of food. So he felt, as a loving husband, I'm going to give it to her.
Right.
You know, so I feel on some level he felt that was him helping, you know, his part of being a good husband. But I tell you, with that particular family, that as we went to McDonald's and he ordered the food, and what was incredible for me is that he ordered, it was £48. That figure is locked into my head. So that's about $65, $70 maybe, something like that, just for one meal for a family of four. But then we got back to the house with the food, right? And check this. We got there, and in the kitchen, they've got trays, right? So they've got McDonald's trays in their kitchen. So they dish up onto the trays and they serve them. So this is what happened then. The son is sitting at the dining table, eating by himself, while sort of scrolling his phone at the same time. Okay. The mum, I think, was watching television. Okay. And she was eating, watching television. I think the daughter might have been on her phone at a different part of the living room, and I can't remember where the dad was. The point is that they're a family of four. The food is already at the same time, yet they weren't eating together. Okay, they were mindlessly eating whilst also, you know, doing their emails, sending text messages, doing their social media updates, whatever. And so the intervention I made with them, and I made it with lots of those families, is to have one meal a day with someone else, if possible, sitting around a table. And I'm telling you, Tom, that was transformative. That whole social connection piece, and one of the recommendations I make in the Relax Pill is that eat round a dinner table for at least one meal a day with someone else if you can. You eat less when you do that, right? Why? Because you're not mindlessly eating. We can easily overeat when we're doing something else. There are studies showing that if you eat whilst watching television, you eat much more, right? We know the feeling. I know when I used to watch a lot of sports games on TV with my buddies, and there'd be like a bowl of crisps there or tortilla chips. How many of those things can you do whilst you're watching the game?
Yeah, it's super interesting the way that people deal with food.
If you enjoyed that video, here's another video I picked out for you that's going to help you to improve your health today.
The stress hormones not only damage cells in the hippocampus, they damage your microbiota in the gut. They get it out of balance, and you know your microbiome is creating 95% of the serotonin